Hey guys, welcome to the podcast, the Fieldcraft Survival Podcast. I'm actually in the Mighty Oaks studio, thanks to Chad Robichaud and his team. I'm here talking to Luis Rivera. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks. Man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is it's an amazing time to get outside of our bubble in Prescott, Arizona, and to do interviews on the road. Mighty Oaks offered up their studio, and actually, I'm talking to Luis, and he's a employee now of Mighty Oaks, and not even realizing it. And Chad kind of connected us on this, but you have an extensive career in special operations, specifically the SEAL teams, and I don't know if it's a famous or infamous start to your career when your class was highlighted on the Discovery Channel with Class 234, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to say, it's funny because we were just talking about with Nick. It's like you probably get tired of hearing about that or being exposed to that because that's how you started your career in the teams. But when I was watching that documentary, I was a 20-year-old E5 in the infantry, and it really stuck with me. Like I see your face, and it's almost like I know you. And that show, I know this personally from experience, started a lot of guys' careers in special operations because they saw the emotional connection and the struggle, the bond between brothers, and it was. And I don't say painted like it was there was an architect behind it, but it was very an amazing documentary. And I mean, I didn't think it was canned. I didn't think it was Hollywood. I think it was a real cool experience to watch. Now, to experience might have been a little different. Starting out, I kind of want to talk about your background because I didn't realize it up to that point that you were on submarines for 10 years. And not only that, but you were an E6, which is, if people know about the Navy and the ranks, I was a 20-year-old E5. I was a team sergeant E8 when I was 30. Not saying that we didn't earn it, but it's a lot different rank structure-wise. To be a senior 10-year E6 in the Navy, going through BUDS, and to have that captured by Discovery Channel, what was that experience like for you?
Challenges, a lot of humble pie. I think I came out of the submarine community wanting to do something different, and when I got to BUDS, I did get some. I expected what I got, which was really a challenge to my way ahead in a way. So what I mean is, I had some instructors that really push and challenge me to see whether I was there for the legit reasons. Because usually guys that get there in their senior either don't make it or are there for the wrong reasons. And if we roll it back a little bit, in 1995, I actually went through BUDS for the first time.
Oh wow! 5 years prior to.
5 years prior to that, and I remember coming in one Monday morning in 1995 and talking to the first phase officer and saying, "Listen, I'm done." It was after a weekend, and it was maybe 3 weeks into training. And I said, "I'm done." He asked me. I remember him asking me, he said, "Do you ever want to come back?" I said, "No, I'm done."
Wow.
Yeah, but during that time, obviously I was immature and just my head wasn't right. I had just gotten married. Ironically, when I went back 5 years later, I was getting a divorce from my first wife, and I knew that I was there for the right reasons the second time.
Wow.
In the show says that that it was my third time trying. The truth is that I was there for the second time, but I actually started in 233, and when Hell Week came in 233, I got injured. I ended up getting SIPE.
Yeah.
Right, swimmer-induced pulmonary edema, and so I had to go back for day one, week one of 234. I went from a summer Hell Week to a winter Hell Week, and a winter Hell Week. Now, back then, it happened mine happened in December.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I think they push it a little bit back, so it's different now.
So how far were you in it in class 233 before when you got rolled back to day one?
Yeah, so I was into it. So I got injured in Hell Week, so that's 2 weeks of orientation. I think it's, and I can't remember, 3 weeks or 5 weeks of first phase, and then Hell Week. Maybe it was 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What I do remember was I was hating to go back to day one, week one, because by the time I was done in Hell Week, before I got injured, we were done with those logs, and I was so happy to be done with those logs.
Oh.
So I had to go back to day one, week one to 234, and start all over again.
So when they and you know, a little bit of this podcast focuses on resiliency and mindset stuff, and I can imagine that, you know, you're young in the Navy, specifically the SEAL community. You kind of go through all these things, and you're 10 years in now, and you're an E6, and they tell you, hey, we got to start you from day one again. How did that impact you?
I was actually prepared for it.
Were you?
I was.
Okay.
Mentally,
Yeah.
I was prepared for it. I had made the decision before going in that if I gave it my all, I trusted their opinion that I didn't belong there.
Got it. So you had a level of commitment prior to going in.
Yes.
That no matter what was going to happen, you were committed for the long run.
Right. And if they sat me in front of a board and said, listen, this isn't for you, I was willing to accept that and go and do something else.
Yeah, that's a fascinating thing, and I don't want to digress too much, but I think it's fascinating that when you look at your life and how you face challenges, that perception is really important because number one, I talk about it often, especially with relationships and failed relationships, is that your level of commitment initially will set the tone for your success. And so if you go into it and you're going into it half-hearted, you're obviously not going to be set up for success. But if you have a level of commitment saying, hey, I'm committed to the cause, and with you even doing that, and then also additionally, which is hugely important in mindset, saying that you're willing to accept from the experts. If you weren't the kind of person that belonged there, you're willing to walk away with acceptance, which is solace. You know, it's like it's saying, hey, you know, I'm accepting what you're doing, which will allow me to move on in my life and in my future, and not hold me back. Because a lot of people who don't have that mindset, and they get told, hey, you're not what it takes, and they're not prepared for it. They walk away from it and they spend the rest of their lives kind of this agony. But when you set the tone right up front and set the stage for the process, then it's setting you up for like long-term health, especially mentally, obviously. So you get washed back into 234. And I remember, man, it's all coming back to me because it's funny because when I first saw your face, I went, I know that guy. I definitely know him. And I do remember, because I was training up for selection at the time, and I remember watching that show and being invigorated by it because I could see the struggle, but I also saw the emotional connection and the brotherhood, and I wanted that in my life. I wanted to be around like-minded guys that were fighting really hard. Talking a little bit about the show, because I think it's pretty cool. Did the cameras impact the way you guys were treated from Discovery Channel? Did it kind of determine your destination, your future in Buds because they were there?
I don't think so. What I do know about the cameras is since I was an LPO, the leading petty officer, the cameras would brief with the instructors beforehand. As the LPO, we got more information than the rest of the class. But that didn't take away from the training.
Yeah.
On top of that, things happened outside of the camera that the cameras didn't see. So, yeah, I don't think it impacted training much.
Yeah.
It was, like I said before, it was wintertime, and I don't think much has to happen during wintertime to get guys to either realize in their minds that they want to be there for the right reasons or not.
Do you think it was an advantage at all? Because I imagine, maybe this is the new culture and the new way of thinking, but I imagine that if I am being filmed, that I know that this is going to be documented for the rest of my life, potentially and archived, that there would be an incentive there to understand that if you quit, you're doing it, and it's going to be noted for the rest of history. Was there any of that in your mindset, or was the only focus just on the mission at hand?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the onus is on the instructor staff to make you forget about the cameras, and that happened.
Yeah.
Because to look at a guy in the face who, during Hell Week, to look a guy in the face and know that he's making the conscious decision not to continue, and guys are around him to saying, hey, dude, are you sure this is what you want to do?
Yeah.
Let's do this together. And him still walk away means that he didn't care if the cameras are there or not. And everyone else, the rest of us realized that we still have to stick it out, you know.
Yeah. Is there anything defining that kind of stands out to you during that experience in Buds? I mean, I know, you know, I've talked to other SEALs that have been through Hell Week, and I imagine that a winter Hell Week is just, you know, twice the pain, because you're not only cold but you're wet. Is there anything that stands out to you about the experience?
One of the most challenging times about that training was, I don't know if you remember or not, there was the steel pier. It's when you have to tread water, and they skin layers off. And the one thing I do recall about that experience is that beforehand, I made the decision to memorize something so that whenever the pain did come in that period when I wanted to be over, but it wasn't, I would recite that whatever I memorized, which caused me to take the pain off myself, and or at least take the focus off myself, take the focus off the pain, and help out in any way that I can with the class. Yeah. Because it got, man, I was born in Puerto Rico. I was raised in Louisiana. Hot. I love hot. When it came to cold, no.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I knew that would be a challenge for me, and so beforehand I prepped and I memorized whatever I could. So when that time came, I focused on reciting that.
Did you learn that, or was that something that you just decided to do?
I decided to do it.
That's fascinating, because that, you know, when you look at, I mean, it's a mantra. You developed a mantra that would keep your focus, your cognitive focus, on something outside of the physical pain, right? And that's what got you through that. Do you remember what it was?
Well, what I do know, it was a Bible verse.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it was.
So you memorized that verse and continue to say that again and again.
And it wasn't just one. It was like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So I had to work hard, you know.
Yeah.
And so, it helped. The time went by.
I always think this is fascinating, but I imagine, you know, you have practitioners of mindfulness and practitioners of meditation, and that have formulated tactics and techniques in addressing how to keep the mind focused, or stay resilient, or just stay in the fight. And what's amazing to me is that individuals, despite that education, that are suffering, human beings that are suffering, formulate that tactic on their own, right? It's not a standard. It's like a behavioral model where it's like almost intuned in us to do that. Because I remember doing the same thing. I remember saying mantras or doing things repetitively that kept me focused and my attention away from pain. Because as soon as you fall into the trap of falling in love with the pain, it's very easy to justify or convince yourself that the pain that you're in doesn't have to be there anymore. It's as easy as raising your hand and quitting. Did you ever think about quitting? Did you ever think about ringing that bell?
What I did think about was, how long is this going to last? What I did think about was, do I have what it takes? But what helped was really the guy next to me. Man, this guy can do it. And then the level of maturity of the instructor staff.
Yeah.
One thing I did tell myself when I got there the second time was the fact that, man, these guys bleed red like me. So that helped too.
You have a, when you're looking at those kind of situations where you're comparing yourself to other people that are, to the right and left of you, does that kind of give you energy to sustain and live with the burden of pain in that moment because you know that you're not suffering alone? You know that, or is it the opposite? Is it because they're suffering or because somebody else is quitting, it's giving you energy to know that you're still in it? Is it, is it a combination of multiple things?
One thing that I found out early on in training was if I did things first, if I suffered first and I got it over with, I would somehow contribute to the class. I realized as a LPO and the leader, the enlisted leader of that class, a lot was required of me.
Yeah.
So I figured if I got that out of the way, the pain out of the way first, I would be an example. I would help guys out and kind of like take the focus off of me. And what I didn't want to be is self-focused. The moment I started to focus on self, it wasn't good.
Yeah.
It just wasn't.
I can't remember the moment. Man, this is all coming back to me. This is weird. I can't remember the moment, but I do remember there was a time in which the instructors were trying to get you to turn kind of on the class. Like they were playing the role of like, hey, what's the sacrifice here? And you committed, I don't know if you remember that, but it's something like you were like, nope, I'm doing it, or is something where you were just like,
I remember that.
What was that?
It's interesting.
Yeah, what was that?
I remember the face of the instructor. I remember so much about that now you mention it. So what it was is I was told to go hit the surf. It was during Hell Week, actually.
Yeah.
I was told to go hit the surf. I was going to go with everyone, and I had to be the first one back.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yep.
But there were guys that were faster than me. There were guys that were just killing it, and I was just, this grind was just starting to get at me. But there came a point when one of the instructors was telling me, hey, listen, why don't you just get the class together and have them let you win? And I kind of, when he said that, I kind of looked at him like, are you crazy?
Is this real?
Yeah. But for a split second, he caught me off guard. But
Yeah.
I was so committed in earning this thing.
Yeah.
I was committed in earning this thing.
Yeah. He wanted you to make an integrity violation.
Oh,
Man. He was leading you down
There
that
was
path.
so many of those things along the way.
Yeah.
And I realize that now looking back. But, they were just constantly checking. But no, I put that out of my head, and I just kept going until finally the instructor who did say, who actually initially started that whole thing, pulled me aside, and he looked at me in the face, and he says, you like this, don't you? And then I knew somehow in the back of my mind, I'm getting somewhere.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing. I remember definitively a whole bunch of segments of that play, which is the conversation of trying to manipulate the situation, but at the same time grooming you for leadership.
Sure.
Because the reality is, and this is for anybody who's listening to this who doesn't understand the process, when you're a senior guy, there's a higher expectation. Yeah. And there's also a higher standard. The expectation is you expect people to operate a certain way when they're at a higher rank. And then the reality is that's not always true. But if they step up to the plate and they actually show the aptitude to be at that level, then there's a grooming process that takes place, because you could turn decent leaders into good leaders, or good leaders into great leaders, because of that experience. I remember that experience in different courses that I've been through. But you're right, it's a lot more difficult to be in that position, because when you're in that position, not only are you handling all the admin tasks for the entire element, but you're held to a different standard. And I don't know if this is applicable. It's almost like you've earned it twice. It's more difficult for you in that sense. But it also, and this is from personal experience, and I want to get your take on it. It's also a source of fuel, of energy, because when you're somebody who's willing to accept the sacrifice, then that's a noble cause. And when you're able to take that torch and run and move forward, it gives you energy. And I remember, being in a patrol base and ranger school, or being in selections, and being given that task and then going, you know what, people are depending on me now. And so now that there's a form of dependence, you're not a sole. In fact, I would say in a lot of ways, a sole isolated person could end up in a bad situation faster because they don't have the support. They don't have the energy that's driven by others. Did you find that in the sense that you were invigorated by the responsibility that you had to step up and lead from the front?
I think it's important to say before I answer the question, before I got to training, because of what I went through in '95 back then, I realized that I needed to be physically prepared. Because the mental stress was going to be there. I couldn't do anything about it. If I could physically prepare myself, then it would open up my mind to deal with contingencies, whatever it was.
Right? You have more capacity to deal with things.
And so what ended up happening was I realized that, okay, physically, I'm doing okay. And I'm talking 234 now. Physically, I'm doing okay. And so I learned that if I can do something that will help the whole class, then that's a good thing. And so I fed off of that good thing. It got to the point where when it came, so during training we do 4-mile time runs. Right, on the hard packed sand. Right. It got to the point where early on in training, I was allowing the whole class to cross the line first, and then I'd start my run.
Wow.
And then and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just saying that
you knew, and you know in advance.
I was physically confident that I could get through the class and finish top 5, top 6, top 7, even by allowing everyone else to go first. But that did a lot for me, I think, moving forward in the class. As a leader, because another thing you have to understand too is I came from an environment that I was solo, man. So everything I did on my own, and I was real quiet. I wasn't really responsible for anything. Like this, like I was in 234. So what they wanted from me was to have a voice and get guys to do stuff. But in my mind, what that meant was me doing it and they follow. But they wanted me doing it and saying something. They wanted me doing and being a voice.
They wanted you to lead,
and I wasn't used to that. But they broke me out of that.
Well, you definitely went from the far extremes of it, right? I don't know the duties and responsibilities of a submariner, submariner. Submariner.
Yes, I went.
But I know that life is a lot of that life is lived in confinement. It's a lot of isolation, and so you come from that position where you're working with a small crew on a small vessel, and now you're responsible for driving people and influencing people that are on the front lines of combat. How did that experience overall, do you think, set you up for success going and becoming an operational SEAL on the teams?
How did that experience? It taught me that no matter how senior I was, there was something I needed to learn. Because I realized that once I was done with this training and I get into a platoon, there's going to be junior guys that know way more than me. And I got to learn. And I did. And that's, I did. I went into my first platoon, and there were some really, really good guys that were junior to me, but were willing to teach me at the same time. Probably not too different from a platoon where you were. Once somebody knew your buttons, you become this family. So there was tests all the time going on, especially me being an E6 going into the platoon. Right? Who is this guy? Senior. You don't know everything. Learn something. And that process, coming from that environment to here, humble pie is what I ate.
It's a humbling experience.
Humble pie, it was my meal constantly.
Something that stands out to me about your story, talking about 1995 and going into 2000, is you had a relationship, you know, digressing a little bit about your personal experience. I've often found that personal life experiences really drive kind of the incentives, motivations behind a lot of our journeys in our career fields or our passions. You know, because, you know, I've been in the same boat where I got out of the military for a short period of time, from the infantry into special forces, because of a relationship. But it wasn't what my passion was. I wanted to fight. I wanted to be with the most elite guys on the planet. And then you said at the end of that, which is the beginning of your Bud's career in 2000, that you were going through that divorce. Is that part of the mechanism, and is that something that you were held back because of your personal life, and then, you know, and leaving that as you went through that divorce process? It almost feels like, and this is just me tying in my personal experiences, it almost feels like that was the weight that was let go to be able to fulfill your passion, and then might have been a driving factor. And I'm speculating.
Yeah, no, I wish that could be the case, but it wasn't. And you know, I'm not too proud to say this, but in '94, I had a child out of wedlock, right, and then I got married. So all that happened really fast. In that marriage, after I quit Buds, I had 2 more children in that marriage. So when I got a divorce and I went to Buds, well, I started to get a divorce and I went to Buds.
Yeah.
My youngest was months old, right? My son was 4 years old, and my oldest, who was out of wedlock, was 5 years old. So trying to make sense of all that, going through a divorce, and then on top of that, post 233 into 234, my father passes away, and I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to be held back in training. Anyway, what I'm trying to say by that is I felt a lot of shame and guilt from not being at my dad's funeral. You know? There was a lot going on in the background, but I was painted into a corner. I was either going to fight, I was either going to do something, or just ball up and lay down.
Yeah, and people don't, you know, I, as a veteran advocate, when I talk about veteran issues, you know, I never try to highlight veterans as being somehow different than civilians, somehow better, because I hate that symbology, or I hate that stereotype that's been associated with that. But what people don't understand is there's levels of sacrifice that aren't highlighted, right? People think going to war is sacrifice. For me, it never was. For me, going to war was fun. It was more entertainment than anything else, because I was exactly where I trained to be, where I wanted to be, and there was no difficulty in that. The difficulty is when you look at things like, you didn't go to your dad's funeral because you knew that sacrifice would advance you to be among the most elite. Maybe that's what your dad would have wanted, as opposed to not making the sacrifice on the other end. And those are difficult challenges that veterans face every single day, that they have to live with, that they have to live the rest of their days with. And, you know, did I make the right decision to go into this career field? Did I make the right decision to go to war? Because I lost everything. You know, I come from a similar experience where, you know, because of my own mistakes, I lost everything. I mean, I lost my family, really my entire life essentially was lost because of my commitment to the military and my personal decisions and the mistakes and flaws that I had at the time. And so that's all sacrifice. And you know, you made lots of sacrifices, which, you know, it's, you know, I would like to think that your dad would have been proud of that that decision, because who knows where you'd be right now if it wasn't for that decision. You know, who knows. So you do an operational career in the SEAL teams, and I say operational because I just want people to understand that when you're serving in special operations, you are operational, meaning you are working for war. It's a cycle.
Yep.
It's a down cycle. There's a train up cycle, and there's an up cycle going to war. You did that for how many years?
Probably 10.
10 solid years, decades.
Yeah. So I did 3 platoons at one team, went into 2 years of training, and I did another platoon.
Yep.
And then after that last platoon, I did 4 years and change as an instructor.
So, I mean, that's what we call in special operations a full spectrum career, right? You start off in training and you gotta go through this cycle, and it's almost like what you're living now, where you're giving back, and you experience all the things, and then you go back, and then you're an instructor again. How was it to be back at Buds instructing young men who were making that sacrifice? Was there kind of a, I don't know, that seems to me, I never got to be an instructor at the schoolhouse, but I imagine that's a really, one, cool job, but it's also a huge responsibility.
Sure, yeah. Realizing that you have a say-so in what direction these guys go. To live that life as an instructor, being an example for these guys coming through, the decisions you make in front of them when bad things happen, good things happen, really plays into their mindset going forward. And
you're shaping them right then and there.
Shaping them, yeah. For me, fortunately, when I first started in training, it was towards the back end. 6 months of that basic is what at Buds is what they've gone through, and then when I got them, it was towards the tail end of that 3-month SEAL qualification training at Low End Warfare. So they've been shaped all the way along, and I get them more mature.
Yeah.
But still, to be able to coach them through whatever they were going through, I liked it. I did.
Yeah.
Then it came a point where I had to make a decision to get out, and so I went from SEAL qualification training to the very beginning, orientation. And
what's the orientation include? What is that?
Yeah, it's 3 weeks of them being oriented at how the kind of exercises, the kind of timeline,
the standards. You're lining out the standard.
And so they come to us from 8 weeks of Buds Prep, which is in Great Lakes.
Does everybody go through Buds Prep?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing. So 8 weeks prior to even starting, they have to be prepped up, ready to go.
Right, and it's them really getting stronger.
Yeah.
Swimming, just getting stronger before they come to orientation. And in orientation, we saw them on this schedule to let them know, hey, this is what's going to be like. And then Buds is, you taste the blood in your mouth.
Wow.
Opening in Buds, yeah.
So during the orientation phase, is there anything you learned from that experience? Because imagine when you get a cycle of human beings who are willing to make a distinct sacrifice for their country, and you have to partition, who's going to be able to move forward versus who's not. Was there any significant learning experiences from that?
Yeah, for me, what I learned most is if you decide on a standard, that's the standard. And a person is either going to meet it or deselect themselves.
Yeah.
But the key is the standard is the standard.
Yeah. And is that physical and mental attributes or behavioral attributes, or is it mostly physical?
Yeah, I didn't deal a lot with mental. The only time I think any kind of real counseling came in was when the guys were not meeting the physical standard. And my job in orientation then was that, look, man, you've made it through 8 weeks of prep. Physically, you're capable. So do what's right. And meet the standard. So that's by the extent.
If you had to outline a few attributes that you noticed of candidates that were successful, either in orientation or even Buds, could you outline a few of those for somebody who's listening to this?
I would say that the guys that physically prepared, they made the decision to physically prepare because they knew what they were getting into. Yeah. They made the decision to finish.
I've noticed a trend of preparation. Right? Yeah. It's all in prep
work. Yeah. And here's the biggest one. I found out that the guys that were willing to admit when they were wrong and own that did well.
Really? So guys who were more self-aware and then humble to accept when they were wrong. I did notice that in that class, the admission and the of the responsibility of wrongs. And that's a good piece of advice, because it's important that in that understanding, that's kind of the process or the cycle that resets you and kind of resets your or calibrates your compass to keep you in the right direction moving forward.
Yeah.
Because, you know, interrupting that cycle and not admitting to that, using ego or something to diminish or take away from that experience, will only set you up for more failure, not necessarily success. So you have to be humble in that. That's really good advice.
That's living a lie.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Or a mask. You got a mask on.
Yeah, and a lot of people do live that way their entire lives. You know, when you go from a really significant career that truly defines who you are, did you look at that way when you transitioned out of the military? And what was your decision for leaving the military? Did you wake up one day and was it a process? Walk us through that.
Yeah. So I think because I came in so senior and being on submarines for 10 years, coming into this community and doing it for 14 years, I really wasn't identifying with anything for me. I really wasn't. I enjoyed what I did. And beyond that, being born in Puerto Rico and growing up in Louisiana, joining the military when I was 17, man, everything was brand new and fresh, and I tried to keep it that way. The decision for me to get out, which, by the way, led to me feeling, you know, this bitterness and this resentment, it was really the onus was on me. I wasn't taking care of the things at home because early on in my SEAL career, I'd gotten married. And being married in the teams is a challenge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not on the same sheet of music, man, it's gonna be painful. So by the time I decided to get out, the way my marriage was going influenced that decision. I've done a lot of things wrong in my marriage. I was really good at work. I was horrible as a husband, horrible as a dad.
Yeah.
And so I made the decision to get out because I realized that, man, it's been 22 years of me doing this. I think she deserves better. So I decided to get out 22 years, and I eventually got out at 24 and 8 months.
Do you think retracting or understanding that experience, is there a way to strike the balance? I mean, I even searched for that answer and to figure out, you know, hey, if I could take it back, what would I do differently? And what's your opinion?
Yeah, time, right? And it's like I figured this out way after I got out, right? The more time I spent with her, and not only time, but intentional time, being there whenever I was there, made a huge difference. So what am I trying to say is those 14 years that, 12 years that I was married to her by the time I decided to get out, man, when I was home, I wasn't. My mind was somewhere else.
You weren't present.
No, I wasn't. Yeah. And had I been present, I think it would have made a huge difference, because she knew what she was getting to when she got married. And, but, man, I had it so lopsided. I was really good at work, you know, of being at work. But even after a while, because of what was happening at home, your character kind of takes a hit. Right? I'm this way at work and I'm this way at home. Man, who am I?
I've noticed a similar story with special operations guys, including myself. I'm in the same boat where personally it's almost like I was a train wreck. You know, I really was lost in my personal life. Professionally, I was a rock star. And so, you know, people see your career in special operations and they hold you on a different platform, not realizing the difficulty. But what I've noticed is the more men who come out and talk about this experience, it really sets a really good precedence and life balance, and then the priority of work for your life. And so it's a real healthy thing. Do you have regrets? Do you regret that time? And if you can go back, I mean, do you live with that regret, or is it now I'm moving forward because now I have some form of redemption?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And the way I'll answer it is, when I initially got out, yeah, man, I had tons of regrets. What helped me out was realizing that I don't have to stay there. Because now I have a chance to rebuild.
Yeah.
Right? Now I have a choice going forward. Realizing I had a choice back then.
Yeah.
Right? But now going forward, I have a choice to make time spent with her intentional, be present. And that's making a world of difference.
Yeah, it's like what we talked about originally, is the redemption thing, right? When you're giving yourself a chance, and then you commit to it. Not this half-hearted approach, but you truly commit, because so many people navigate this life and they're half in, half out, and they're not committed, and then they continue the same bad habits. But once you get out and then you realize you do have the opportunity here to make a complete change, to be present, to give people your time, to have balance, to be a good man or be a good husband or a good wife, then it changes everything. And so moving forward from that point on, personally, you made a commitment. How did your transition from military life to civilian life go?
Yeah.
Professionally.
Oh, professionally?
Well, starting out professionally, yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing I realized that now that I'm out, I need a new trade. I want to learn a new trade.
I like the story of the BMW thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a mechanic. And while in mechanic school, I realized I want to diagnose BMWs. So I became a mechanic. I didn't become.
Where does that come from? Where does that come? Where does that? Is it because I have the same kind of mind, like the zen of maintenance kind of thing, where motorcycle maintenance, where there's something there.
Sure.
It's almost like therapy. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I think it comes from, number one, I think my upbringing, because I was really raised by my mom, and because they got a divorce when I was 12.
Yeah.
And I saw my mom put herself through the police academy and raised 5 kids as a single cop.
Wow.
And then
impressive.
Yeah, and then she retired in Southeast Louisiana.
Wow. Yeah.
As a woman of color.
Wow.
As an assistant warden at a jail. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, she's really taught me a lot. Now I think that. But back then I realized, I've learned a lot from her. So part of that, and partly I think it's because, it has to do with the reason why I went into Spec Ops in the first place. I wanted to do things that no one else wanted to do, and just be busy and what I thought was contributing. And I liked vehicles. I liked working on cars. So I figured, well, why not? So I started to do that. 6 months down the road of this mechanic school that I was in, I got a phone call from my oldest daughter, the one I had out of wedlock.
How old is she at the time?
She just turned 21. And because she just turned 21, she had come into some really challenging times. And it involved drugs. And at that point, I hit a wall. Because after figuring out what the trauma that has happened in her life, from that school, I ended up going to pick her up 6 hours away with the plan of fixing it because I did it.
Yeah.
I'm the one who put her here. I got to fix it. And so that situation I brought back home and at that time, her and my wife were really getting along. My wife, the stepmom. And so my solution was to get help, but not live at home, live in a hotel room with my daughter, who's this is the longest time we've been together. We actually spent 9 days in a hotel room of me watching her come down off of this stuff. And,
wow.
And it was life-changing for me because I thought I could fix it. Well, coming out of that, some stuff came up in me that I realized I wasn't dealing with, And my wife really picked it out early on. She says, you know, the reason why you're going to mechanic school is because you don't want to deal with what's really going on with you. And so she was right. She was right. And it wasn't shortly after that that I walked into a VA office and I said, listen, I need to sleep. And they started me off on meds, and I went and I got a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a marriage therapist, a licensed social worker, and all these people were trying to help me out, along with, you know, some other people on the outside, like Debbie Lee, Mark Lee's mom. She helped me out too, and sending me through some stuff. And then through all that, you get maybe 6 months down the road. I'm thinking I'm okay. I'm fine. It's time for me to go find another job.
Yeah.
Right? And my wife says, no, you're not fine. You need to go do what you started off with this Mighty Oaks thing. Because during that 6 month time, I ended up filling an application for Mighty Oaks. But that happened 3 months into it. And then 3 months later, that's 6 months, I said, you know what? I don't want to take a spot from somebody else who probably needs it. And so I'm gonna call up Brandon Kunith and say, listen, I don't want to take a spot. So I need to go find a job. But Chad quickly learned, after my wife just reached out to the world for some help, and things were okay in my mind between her and I, but she still knew there was something going on, and that's when Chad made some calls, got some people to call me, and I ended up going to Mighty Oaks.
What is it about, because what stands out to me is, you know, when we go through life experiences, and it's almost as like a special operations guy, and I'm not excluding anybody in this conversation, but I'm just talking about our circumstances in the same parallel world. A lot of people would refer to what we have experienced as post-traumatic stress. They would say, hey, listen, there's issues that you're dealing with. And they're demons, they're issues, and you kind of work through those issues. But what I realized in coming out of the military and then being exposed to the clinics, the psychologists, the people who want to help, is that the reason we're going to them is because what seems to be issues in our personal lives. And I wonder if there's a connection between the neglect because of our commitment elsewhere, right? Because you only have so much narrowed focus, right? You can narrow your focus and you have a window and you have an angle, and that narrow focus could only be attentive in one position, one set direction. And then when you set your eyes and focus, everything else becomes blurry and then is neglected. And obviously having a family, having kids, going through life problems that the civilian world lives every single day, and we neglect those things, we check out. What seems to be we check out. We think we're focused on the mission, right? There's only one distinct priority here, and it's living in combat. It's surviving with my brothers, because everything else is less important, because we prioritize it that way. When the reality is, when we come back to that after our focus has been dialed back in, then we're left with a mess. And so I noticed that all the guys that I've operated with, including myself, have come back to all these issues that are related to personal effects and relationships that have been neglected. And now we're left picking up the pieces. And then when you refer or defer back to yourself and your own experiences, you don't have anything to lean on. You don't have your teammates. You don't have distractional deployments. You don't have training sessions. You don't have the tooling on your BMW. Now you're actually literally have to face the mess that you left. And so we start to assemble the pieces. How has it been? What was the moment? Was there a definitive time, place, moment where you knew that you needed help? You knew that you needed somebody to assist you in that forward progress?
Yeah. The only way I can know how to answer that is that the incident that happened with my daughter was the catalyst. So something really horrible happened, and I hit a brick wall. And I could either choose to check out and not talk to anybody, or pay attention to this woman who loved me that was right beside me.
Did you feel that way about your daughter because you felt like you put her in that situation?
Oh, absolutely. I felt when I learned what was going on with her, man, I rented a car that day, drove 6 hours, got there at 10 p.m., put her in the car, ended up getting back at about 7 a.m. just to put her into this program. Like, I was like focused on getting her help and me fixing it because I'm the one who did it. And it did not turn out what I expected. And man, right now, she's going to school and she's got a job and she's not that person. I'm so thankful that that happened. But to answer your question, that catalyst was her. That whole thing was something bad happened. And then, you know, the chain that was about to break on my bike was just, it just broke. I wasn't going anywhere.
You're pedaling in place.
Oh man, I was just spinning. Yeah, spinning my wheels. But you said something earlier that kind of keyed me on to something. You were explaining something, and then you said the reality was this. And that's the truth about everything. I was living this lie, thinking that, yep, I'm doing good at work, and home will just take care of itself. Well, that was a lie I was believing. I wasn't doing anything at home. How is it supposed to take care of itself? It doesn't make any sense. I realize that now. But that's a lie that I was living back then. Yep, I'm doing everything. I'm putting all my effort into work because this is my job. Oh, and by the way, wife, you're going to have to live with this and fix it. And in my mind, while I'm at work, yep, she's taking care of it. It's going to fix itself. No, that happened 4 times in a row, and it was a disaster.
So you're realizing that you need to take more personal responsibility because you don't have any outlets to blame. I remember myself going, I have a deployment to worry about. I'm going to be in combat with the guys to the left and right of me. Your personal issues, our personal issues, these things that are a priority to you aren't a priority to me because sustaining, protecting, defending is more important than that. When I think the reality is that happens anyway, right? That life, no matter what, is going to be moving in that direction. Striking that balance is the only way to be successful.
Yeah, and I would say too, there are guys that make it successful. There are guys.
I have seen them.
Right?
They're outliers. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Right. So there are guys who are this way at work, are this way at home, and their character does not take a hit.
Yeah. It's amazing to see too.
Yeah.
When I talk to those guys, I like to because I would like to think progressively that the human being that I am today is the human being I wanted to be 10 years ago. And so realizing that moving forward, expressing the faults and the weaknesses I had 10 years ago or even 5 years ago are important to highlight because I want people to know that when you go down into a valley, that eventually you could climb yourself to a peak. And without that circumstance, you'll never be able to grow and never be able to reflect or mentor or communicate the things that you've been through. And I think it's substantial because, I think, your story, even through Buds and this journey that you've taken is important to highlight because with the failure has come success. You're working right now with Mighty Oaks. Tell me about that position. Tell me about what you do for Mighty Oaks and your daily duties and responsibilities.
Yeah, well, I think it's important also to kind of touch on the process that I went through Mighty Oaks. Because when I got to Mighty Oaks, one thing that happened and I wasn't expecting was this transparency and vulnerability of guys who have been where I was, but now are, that were running the program, and I realized, this isn't normal. Because these guys may have had the same experiences that I've had, but they're actually doing well. I want to know more. And so I got to a point in Mighty Oaks where I was asked a question, And because of all that we've been through at Mighty Oaks, I was prepared to answer that question based on all my failures. And then this light bulb came on. I realized I have a choice going forward. And then from that point on, it's like fire, man. It's this radical change happened. And to also touch on what you're talking about, you went into this valley, and then there's a peak that someone led me up there. And that's so key. Yeah. That's what these guys did. They led me up that valley and out of that valley. So there was such this radical change in my life that I went back home and I wanted to fix everything that I've done wrong, right? But my wife wasn't ready for that, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Because she was still hurt from all the stuff, you know? So that took some time. But it got to a point where I remember her coming downstairs some months later, and I'm making breakfast, right? And she comes downstairs with tears in her eyes. And I'm like, what happened, you know? And she goes, you know, I'm sorry. I go, why? What happened? She goes, these past 2 months have been the best 2 months of our 14-year marriage.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I realized that I'm on to something. I'm on the right path. And I was able, and it just got reinforced. So, man, by the way, by that point, I've been volunteering as much as I could for Mighty Oaks. I've been doing whatever trip I could go on, send me. I want this stuff, you know, and give back. I want to give back. People need to know about this. And so Jeremy Stallnecker, the executive director, called me up one day and said, hey, man, you know, do you want a job? And here's what it is. And I'm like, I'm all about it. Yeah. So what I do is I'm the operations / administrative manager. What does that mean? So Brandon Kunis is the national programs director. I am the guy who goes to programs to ensure that whatever Jeremy, Chad, and Brandon want in programs is happening. Kind of like a QA guy.
Yeah.
This thing keeps going down the road. And it's been working out great because we're just growing, right? I started in 2017, January, and the things that I've seen come out of the program, the men's lives that have been changed, lets me know, man, I'm on a good path.
Do you you know, you come from a special operations background, and there's differences, not in character necessarily, but there's differences in kind of mindset compared to other soldiers, sailors, Marines, and the way that we approach things. How has that understanding kind of driven you to where you are now? Did you look at it like you did a mission in special operations and then figure out a way utilizing that, you know, the same experience that maybe set you up for failure is maybe the same process that sets you up for success? Was there any of that?
Yeah, that's a good question because I try not to look at the situation like, man, if I go up, I'm walking down an aisle of a store and I'm going to pick out this little action figure. Like, no, that's not who I am, because we're all different. I think the people that are in my life, that have been in my life, help shape who I am. And I'm also grounded, 100% secure that there's a life that I was created to live. You know, there's a life that that's meant for me, that I'm walking down that path. Mighty Oaks being a faith-based organization, you know, we use the Bible as our standard. What does it mean to be a man according to this thing? What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to be a son? What does it mean to be a brother? And as men, it's so key to know that, because otherwise it's just constantly changing. So to live this life that I was created to live, and because, you know, so many people poured into me, and then I can only give back. And it makes sense to me when Chad says the only thing I can do is give back. Like that's the result, and that's what I want to do, is give back. What does that have to do with my mindset, what I used to have? I think somehow God used that into this.
Maybe as a platform.
Yeah. My mom, subs, things that happened in the Navy. And I realized, man, there's stuff in my childhood that a lot of guys deal with that I didn't know that other guys dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that stuff came out at Mighty Oaks,
Mm-hmm.
and it made for, it helped me. It just helped me.
We had talked about before the podcast about men who serve, even women who serve in the military and have this distinct pinnacle moment or pinnacle career where they think that's life, that is life, and the end of life is when they close that door behind them.
Yeah.
And I use the analogy or just the example, when I was a child looking at my dad at my age now, I was like, he's old, my dad's old.
Yeah.
And now looking at myself at that age, there's a whole new life. There's a whole new phase, a whole new opportunity to live and to leverage that captured experience to teach, empower, strengthen, and help and lift up more people around me who are going through that same experience. And I noticed in society, this isn't a innovative observation, but men and women don't have role models and the mentorship that we necessarily had with real people, real human beings.
Yeah.
Now it's a social media world, now technology, AI, everything's moving so fast that people really need that help, but they don't have that help or that guidance. I mean, I get questions from kids who say, should I join the military? And I say, what do you want to do in your life? Join the military. So I say, yes, you should join the military. And the next day they message me and say, Mike, I joined the military. I'm like, oh, you joined the military? Like, just based off that? And like, well, I just needed the push. I need somebody to communicate to. And not a lot of people have that anymore. What's amazing is I think even outside of this experience in Mighty Oaks is even just explaining your story and communicating it and being vulnerable. You have an opportunity outside of the Navy SEAL platform. You're doing such a good job at helping a lot of people that are listening even to this podcast that otherwise wouldn't have the help because they're hearing your story. I mean, and I wish, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because I just wish more people could hear this conversation because then they would understand the human dynamic, that we're not invincible. Because I was a Green Beret and you were a Navy SEAL doesn't mean we are invincible, that we're somehow immune to life. And when you understand that, then maybe you're not so fearful of going into it with your flaws, with your shortcomings, because there is an opportunity, and it starts like right here this second, potentially moving forward to change all that, to make all those wrongs right. And if that takes, like you said, it just stands out to me, and I'll probably never forget it, is like when your wife came down those stairs. It's impactful because it's a process, specifically for women, right?
Yeah.
We want immediate
right.
feedback. We want to see things happen at the speed of light. But the reality is life outside of the military doesn't work that way. And sometimes being tactically patient will afford you the most opportunities. And it looks like, between your personal and professional life, those things are mending themselves in the right direction.
Yeah, and the fact that I've got a whole new brotherhood. I've got guys that are holding me accountable, and I'm willing to allow them to hold me accountable. But I had to come to that point, and from it, my wife's benefiting. She's benefiting. She's getting a better husband. She's getting a better partner in life. Things are great with us right now. Even if we do fight, things are great.
Yep.
And that definitely, I thank Mighty Oaks so much for that. But I know all of it had to do with living this life and them showing me living this life that I was created to live. So, and that's my hope, really. There's guys out there who are hitting a brick wall, have no answers, are just in a turnabout, and just constantly spinning their wheels. And there is help. There is hope, man. There's other guys that are going through what you've gone through who are better from going to a program like Mighty Oak. So whoever is willing to listen, I'm willing to tell my story. Like you said, I'm willing to be as vulnerable, as transparent as you want me to. And I'll answer any question you want me to about it, about my experiences. Because, we've all experienced stuff that we just hold down deep inside and think that no one else understands.
Yeah.
The reality is, no, we all suffer some of the same things. And if we can connect, if we can get to the truth, then we can get to a solution. But that ain't going to happen until we get to that truth.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Yeah. Hopefully still working with Mighty Oaks. And doing something with my wife that is it's propelling us into a better place. Plus my kids, so my oldest is 25, my youngest is 24. The middle is 24, and my youngest is 20. There is still a lot of stuff that I still have to work with them, right? Because when I got out, they were late teens. They were, and I was gone. So mending that is still a process. By God's grace, they've been able to do well, getting through life. But I know there's still things that need to be talked about. There's still things that need to be shared. And like you said, it takes time with those relationships.
When somebody is going through difficult times, or somebody wants to reach out, is there channels for somebody to apply for Mighty Oaks and to be able to kind of outline their story or get help, or how does that process work?
Yeah, we've got a Facebook page, and part of my job too is answering the messages we get through our Facebook managers page. And they can also go to our website, mightyoaksprograms.org, and we're getting constant feed into that machine to get guys either in applications. Wives ask us questions about their husbands, how we can help their husbands, and our whole goal is to get guys to a program, because 4 programs going on all across the country. We're not having a difficult time right now filling those programs, because guys are starting to learn and realize that it's free. They don't have to pay anything, and even travel if they need it.
Man, wrapping up, how do people get a hold of you? Do you have any outlets for, do you have any social media? Do you have any email addresses for people that might be listening to this podcast and maybe want to ask you a question?
Yeah, so Luis, Luis, at mightyoaksprograms.org.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, Luis. It was a great conversation, man, and flesh out a lot of stuff, and I'm always impressed by the Mighty Oaks Foundation and what you guys do, but to talk to individuals working for the organization, talking to Chad, I'm always impressed at how humble and graceful you guys are at articulating the message. And I think it's an important mission you guys have, and I appreciate your hard work on it, man. Thank you for your service to this country. And thank you for everything you've done for this country, and thank you for being vulnerable and telling your story. Because it's a story that's not told enough, and I think outside of the superhero fringe of the things that we do, there's a deeper underlying story that's more meaningful, and I appreciate sharing it today, man.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. If you're listening to this podcast today is sponsored by Mighty Oaks. You guys could visit mightyoaksprograms.org mightyoaksorg.org. If you guys want to donate, you can donate there. You can donate also on the Facebook page. If you need help, Luis gave his email address, as well as you can reach out on Facebook or the website if you're interested in looking at these programs and learning more. Again, I appreciate everything that Mighty Oaks is providing for us. Thanks for having us in the studio and allowing us to use this. I appreciate Michael and Chad and everybody's help for setting this up. And yeah, until next time. Thanks, guys.